got it wrong with the police. You got it wrong with the woman you married. You got it wrong with me. So you got everything wrong, at least a lot of things wrong that you're talking about, but you have this covert harassment totally right.
No, I admit that I can be wrong, and it obviously was not.
You could. It's possible. Let's just say 1%. Is it 1% possible that you could be wrong about this covert harassment stuff?
There's not even 0.1% chance.
So where is your proof, man?
Yeah, I know.
And could you give it to me? Give it to me. I can define secular ethics in 30 seconds to 60 seconds, and I've done it before. You've been living with this for 10 years. Give me your succinct 100% proof.
No, Stefan, wait, not 10 years. So 3 years. So starting in August 2015.
No, first time. I know, I didn't say permanently. First time was August 2008 with the knock under your toilet. Okay, so give me your 99.9% certainty that all of this is happening, because you have no proof that you've mentioned.
I mean, it's difficult to get proof of some. It's difficult to have proof of like this. That's the only explanation I can give, because it's covert.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the only explanation you can give, and I'd really like to hear it, because I want to know.
No, it's difficult to find a proof, because it's covert. It's kind of like
okay. So Sanjay, you're telling me how rational you are, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, you haven't found any proof for a very wild hypothesis, right?
Again, that's another couple of psychological tricks that he's using. So one he called wild hypothesis, which I object to a little later. And another trick he's using, that he is saying where's the proof, and you can't find any proof, so that implying that there should be some proof. Now that I already explained, that things like this, it's difficult to find proof, and I think being an intelligent person like Stefan, with such a high IQ, it's not that he can't get it. That how can there be something without proof? I mean, he's an intelligent person, so again, he's being disingenuous here, and very much so. And he's using all these tricks and all these ploys, and he's like, how can there be something without proof? And I already explained that it's difficult to get proof for something like this.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. You haven't. No. I've got to be firm here. I'm not going to give you this rope, because I know what you're going to do with this rope.
I don't have any proof.
You have no proof of a very wild hypothesis, right?
I mean, I won't call it hypothesis. I would say.
You won't call it what?
What is happening? I won't call it hypothesis. Hypothesis is something that.
No, if it's not proven, it's a hypothesis, by definition.
Okay.
If it's proven, it's more of a theory, right? So you have an explanation for what's occurring in your life. Right. There are other explanations for what is occurring in your life, right? Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example from my own life, right?
Yeah, sure.
When I was younger, I was in the art world. I studied acting and playwriting. I wrote like 30 plays. I wrote like 5 novels. I wrote hundreds.
So I think he's being disingenuous here, because assumption that he is putting, and the burden that he's putting on me, is that you have to have proof. But many things don't have proof. There's no proof for a lot of things. For example, just take example of food. For example, nutrition. So there has, I mean, people go wrong all the time, even in science, and they think they have proof, but then it turns out that it was a false proof, and it's a tricky subject. And there is no proof for something like climate change, for example. There's some data, but no irrefutable proof. So his stance is that you have to have irrefutable proof, otherwise, what you're saying is a wild hypothesis. So that is again disingenuous. He's putting a burden on me, which is the type of burden which is very infrequently used, even in courts. You a lot of in real life, every time a lot of things happen on circumstantial evidence, or on the basis of most reasonable explanation, or there are millions of things for which there is no proof, but we accept them and know them to be true. So that is another trick that he's employing here.
Poems, like you name it, right?
Right.
Now, I was told by a PhD English major who reviewed my book called The God of Atheists that I had written the great Canadian novel. It was the greatest thing he'd ever read, you name it, right? And I thought, wow, that's great. I can't wait to become a writer, right? And it never happened. Now, part of me could say, well, there's some agenda, there's some harassment, people are calling these people saying, don't publish that Molyneux guy, whatever you do, right? Or I could say, well, I am not a leftist, and the publishing world and the art world is overwhelmingly leftist. So there's no big covert harassment thing. There's just an opposition of values that I wasn't conscious of, right? There's two explanations, and there could be other explanations, right? And there could also be the explanation that my writing wasn't very good. That's possible, right? It's possible. I don't think it's true, but it's possible, right?
Yes.
So there's lots of hypotheses that I could come up with about why I didn't get published in the mainstream world, right? I mean, I even met a woman on a plane who turned out to be working at a publishing house, and she liked the first half of one of my novels, didn't like the second half, so I went and rented a cottage in England for 3 weeks and finished the damn novel. Had to write it by hand for some weird reason. I couldn't type at that point, or I couldn't be creative while typing. And it just never quite happened, right? So there's lots of explanations as to what might be happening to you.
Right.
Now, if the goal of the organization was to what? Discredit you in the eyes of your wife to keep you from winning your custody battle, right? Then you understand that you're doing all the wrong stuff. You're doing all the wrong, like you're absolutely playing into their hands if the goal is for this covert harassment.
I already said that it's an excuse. So most likely, and I think most certainly, it's about business, it's about money. So child custody battle is just an excuse, and it might have been triggered because of my ex-wife's association with this women's shelter organization called Sahara, SAHARA. But there could be other factors at play. And I just had mentioned that, but he seems to have ignored that. So he doesn't want to go in that direction. So he ignores that, and he now assumes that the only reason for this is child custody battle. Again, this is disingenuous. I mean, it's not that he is not aware of of power of money. He speaks about that pretty often, and the businesses do whatever it takes, and left also does whatever it takes to grab power and money. So he is again being disingenuous uh, by appearing to forget all that and focusing uh, uh, on child custody battle.
But to screw up your custody case and never give you custody, you're doing exactly the wrong thing in dealing with it, which is another misreading of the situation. Because if people are trying to make you crazy, you know what you never do? Well, there's two things you never do. Number one, you don't call up the police and say, I'm hearing voices and being hit with energy weapons that can't be detected by any known science. Because they're just going to think. And
again, an assumption on his part that energy devices which can't be detected by any known science. So he does not even know that there are directed energy devices like that. Although I had sent him a link on Wikipedia also, which has some information about this directed energy devices, and so he. Is again being disingenuous here. I think he's lying his head off now. So by fixating on the assumption that these can't be detected, I think they can be detected, but he's fixating on the assumption that they can't. Now it's another matter that I have not been successfully able to detect because it's difficult. It's a little bit tricky. So in this. Also, he is denigrating and he is discrediting and conflating some wild assumptions that or wild statements or some false statements or some outlandish statements with what I have said, and in the process discrediting both. So that's again a psychological trick.
I can't disagree with them that you need professional help for mental issues, right?
So
now the second thing
so this is a person who just mentioned that he has a presentation against psychiatry and psychiatry is a fraud, and now psychiatry is a scam, and now he, in this particular case, he's like, there is a psychiatric problem here, and you need professional help, like they will fix you. So I think very, very disingenuous, and again very sad that which is a real Stefan? Is it the Stefan who passionately claims that psychiatry is fraud and there's no such thing as mental illness, or is it the real Stefan here, where some people do have mental illness and need professional help, and I think it's more that he's finding inconvenient now that he's finding inconvenient to use the psychiatric health label, and why he's doing that, again, this is just ingenuous, so I think there's more to it than he's letting on. So he had already decided even before the conversation started that he's going to use that, and that is what the conversation has been leading up to. And so what could be the reason for him giving up everything that he believes about and claims to believe about passionately, and then not using reason, not using logic, and an ample dose of disingenuity to falsify and discredit what I'm saying is the truth. My personal experience is there. So, what could be the reason for that?
Really not want to do is call in to a very popular philosophy show and talk all about these ideas of yours, because that is going to broadcast to everyone and their dog that what most people are going to think is the same thing that the police thought, right? Which is that you're going to have some challenges correctly processing sense data in the real world, right?
So now he's totally discrediting me, like he's denigrating me, and saying that you are not capable of processing anything at all. Now that's I would say quite a stretch from what I'm saying. What I'm saying is based on technology. This technology is there, can be done. There's tracking and surveillance, and all that I explained to him. But he's like, no. I'm gonna take a leap, and I'm gonna say that everything about you is wrong. So that again, there has to be a reason why he uh, 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 saying that, and I think the reason is that he uh, uh, had already decided that he's gonna do this, and then he is using whichever means are available to do that, and that includes discrediting and putting words in my mouth and things like that. And he is saying exactly the same thing which these harassment agencies are saying. These harassment agencies want him to say. So they want him to say that pin this on mental health issues of the target. They wanted the police to say that pin this on the mental health issues of the target. And so he's speaking the same language which harassment agencies want him to speak. That is disappointing, to say the least.